He thought his marriage was perfect until he discovered the brutal truth about his wife's affair. Betrayed and broken, he planned a revenge so ruthless it would change their lives forever. Watch as he takes control and brings her world crashing down. The question is, will she beg for forgiveness, or will she face the consequences of her actions? It started with a phone call, but it wasn't any ordinary phone call. No, this one was a harbinger of a storm that crept into the depths of my seemingly quiet life, uninvited, tearing everything apart. It wasn't a matter of mere words, but what spilled from the screen, images that shattered my soul. I had always thought I had it all figured out. 10 years of marriage to Stephanie, a stable job, and what seemed to be an ordinary, content life. But in that instant, when the images unlocked the door to a betrayal so profound, the world tilted beneath me. Rage, pain, disbelief, they all clawed at my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My body went cold as the once warm and trusting world I'd known was suddenly no more than a cruel joke. The face of the man in the picture, in my bed, in our home, was all I could see. The betrayal was not just visual, it was visceral. I could feel it ripping through me like an ice-cold blade. I could almost hear my heart breaking as I stared at the screen. I had trusted her. I had given her everything, every ounce of my faith, loyalty, and love. But now, all of that was meaningless. The laughter of the man on the other end of the phone seared through the line, his cocky voice sending a chill down my spine. "If you're this mad, why don't you come and say it to my face?" His voice dripped with mockery, and I could hear the smirk in his words. My fingers shook with fury, my pulse racing as I wanted to rip through the screen. I screamed at her, shouted at the top of my lungs, but Stephanie just ended the call, cutting off the connection between us. I couldn't breathe. My heart thundered in my chest. I had to do something. I had to do something. The anger surged through me, hotter and fiercer than I ever thought possible. But something in the pit of my stomach held me back from rushing home. What was the point? What excuse could she possibly give me now? There would be no forgiveness. I told myself I would finish my work for the week. I couldn't just fly off the handle. But I couldn't let this go. I couldn't just walk away. I had to know who the hell this man was. I spent the next few days digging through Stephanie's connections, tearing through every social media platform she had ever touched. It didn't take long. The bastard was everywhere. Flashy, cocky, a 23-year-old with an ego bigger than the universe itself. His social media profiles were a shrine to his narcissism. Pictures of himself, his body, his life. It was clear that he thought he could get away with anything. And why wouldn't he? His confidence knew no bounds, and the man wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was flaunting the affair as if it were some badge of honor. It sickened me. But the real blow came when I saw that she had been following him, connecting with him, reaching out. It was all there in black and white, plain as day. How long had this been going on? Was this just one incident, or had this been a festering wound for months, maybe even years? The questions ate at me, gnawing away at my mind. It wasn't long before I found out exactly who he was. His name was Matt, a cocky, self-absorbed man-child with a love for the spotlight. And I was going to make him pay. I could feel the blood boiling in my veins as I concocted my plan. No confrontation through the phone. No, that was too easy. I needed to look this bastard in the eyes and make him feel the weight of his actions. I had to watch the realization hit him when he saw me, when he understood exactly who I was and what I had learned. I would make him tremble. I borrowed a female friend's social media account to get his attention. One simple question was all I needed to ask. "Do you have a girlfriend?" His reply was just as I'd hoped. "Yeah, but I'm not tied down. Always open to some fun." Perfect. I arranged to meet him in a secluded park. I wanted to see the arrogance drain from his face when he realized the game was over, that he wasn't going to just walk away unscathed. It took everything in me to wait until my plane landed. I didn't go home. I went straight to that park, and the moment I saw him, my blood boiled. He stood there, his hair slicked back with cheap gel, his outfit loud, flashy, and utterly ridiculous. He had no clue who he was about to face. I walked up to him, standing inches away, my voice sharp and clear. "Were you expecting me?" His eyes narrowed. A moment of confusion flickered across his face before the arrogant smirk returned. "Dude, I think you've got the wrong guy. Get lost." I didn't give him the luxury of walking away. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and showed him the messages. "You don't know me, but I know you very well," I said, the coldness in my voice cutting through the air. "You've been sleeping with my wife." The smirk on his face disappeared in an instant. The fear was palpable as it spread across his face like wildfire. He stepped back, but I was quicker. I grabbed him by the collar, pulling him back toward me, forcing him to meet my eyes. I leaned in close, my voice low and dangerous. "How long have you and Stephanie been together?" I growled. His body stiffened as he stammered. "A few months. Just a few months." I wasn't buying it. Not for a second. "Don't lie to me." His knees shook beneath him. Desperation was written across his face. He couldn't escape. And then, in a moment that shattered everything I had ever believed, he admitted it. All right. It's not just me. Your wife? She's been seeing other guys for a long time. Whenever she's alone, she finds someone new. She even uses an app for it." My world crumbled. It wasn't just one mistake. It was a pattern, a sickness, a festering wound that had been eating away at me for years. The woman I loved had been lying, deceiving, betraying me at every opportunity. While I had been loyal, she had been out there, with others, giving herself to them. I clenched my fists so tight my knuckles turned white. Without thinking, I struck him. It wasn't a full punch, but it was enough to make him stumble. Blood trickled from his nose as he yelled, "Don't mess me up, man. I've got sponsors, thousands of followers. You'll ruin me." I didn't care. The words were meaningless. I swung again, harder this time, knocking him to his knees. People started to gather, but I didn't care. I didn't have time for them. I pulled him up by the collar, looking into his eyes one last time. "Next time you mess with a married woman, you better think twice." I walked away, leaving him there, humiliated, broken. But a lingering doubt gnawed at me. What if he was telling the truth? What if Stephanie had been doing this for a long time? I wasn't going to wait for her excuses. I needed to know. So I downloaded the app. It was time to find out the truth. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, my eyes scanning through the app. Her app. The one she had used to betray me. The one where she had found countless men to satisfy her lust, her need for attention. I scrolled through the messages. Intimate, lust-filled exchanges that painted a picture of the woman I thought I knew. A woman who had been hiding in plain sight. And then I saw it. Her profile. A picture of her, my wife, smiling brightly, her arms draped around some man I didn't recognize. His arm was around her waist, pulling her close, like they were some happy couple. My stomach churned with nausea. How could she do this to me? How many others had there been? How many times had I walked past her with no clue, thinking I had the perfect marriage, while all along, she was building a web of lies, weaving herself into the arms of every man who crossed her path. I had never felt more like a fool in my life. I swiped through the messages, trying to make sense of the chaos she had created, and then I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. A message from a name I didn't recognize, Matt. It was the affair partner, the very same man I had confronted in the park. He had been more than just some random fling. He had been a regular in her life, and now he was offering her something more, a life without me. He wanted her. She was his now, and I was just some obstacle to be discarded. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. It wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just a fling. She was planning on leaving me. The betrayal burned through me with the fury of 1,000 suns. But there was no way in hell I was going to let her walk away with everything she wanted. No, I wasn't going to be the fool who sat back and let her destroy everything I had built. I wiped the sweat from my brow, trying to control the storm of emotions swirling inside me. But my mind was made up. It was time for me to take control of this situation. I locked my phone and tossed it on the table. I was done with playing nice. It was time to make my move. That night, I didn't go home. I couldn't. The thought of facing her, of looking her in the eye after everything I had uncovered, was more than I could bear. I needed to think. I needed space. So, I rented a small apartment for a few days to clear my head, to figure out my next steps. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't escape the rage that was building inside me. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with my life, had thrown it all away for some worthless, arrogant bastard who thought he could just waltz into my world and claim it as his own. It didn't matter that I had worked hard, sacrificed my time, my energy. None of it mattered. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. I would make her regret it. I knew I had to make this personal. I had to make her understand the depth of her betrayal. But I needed more than just the affair. I needed to take everything away from her. Her friends, her reputation, her sense of security. I wanted to burn her world to the ground. The next morning, I contacted one of my closest friends, Daniel, a former colleague who had connections in high places, someone who knew how to pull strings, someone who understood the gravity of what I was going through. I needed help, and he was the man I could count on. Daniel, I need you to do something for me, I said, my voice flat, emotionless. I need you to get me everything on her, every detail, every shred of information about what she's been up to, her connections, her friends, her secrets. He hesitated for a moment, then replied, "You sure you want to do this? You know it's going to hurt more when you find out." "Do it," I growled, my voice shaking with a cold fury I couldn't hide. "I need to know everything." He agreed, but I could hear the concern in his voice. He didn't understand. He couldn't, but he didn't need to. All he needed to do was deliver. I hung up and leaned back against the wall. My mind was spinning, my emotions a whirlwind of rage and betrayal. The pieces were falling into place, and soon, I would have everything I needed to bring her down. She would pay for what she had done to me. But there was one thing I had to do first. I had to confront her, face to face. It was time. By the time I returned home, it was late in the evening. The house was eerily quiet. I stood outside, staring at the front door, as if trying to summon the strength to open it. Inside, Stephanie was probably waiting, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to hit her. She thought she could control everything, manipulate me, deceive me, but she had no idea what I had learned. She had no idea what was coming. I took a deep breath, my chest tightening with anticipation. Then, I pushed open the door. "Stephanie," I called out. My voice was cold, sharp, unrecognizable. She turned from the kitchen, her eyes widening in surprise. "You're home early," she said, a hint of nervousness creeping into her voice. I didn't answer her. I didn't need to. I stepped forward, holding out my phone. I had one question for her. "Explain this." Her face went pale as she saw the messages. The lies, the flirtations, the confessions, all of it was there, laid bare for her to see. She took a step back, her eyes darting around, searching for a way out. "Please, listen to me," she stammered, her voice shaking. "It wasn't like that." I cut her off, my anger erupting in a single, guttural shout. "Don't lie to me." I slammed my hand against the wall, the sound echoing through the house. "You were sleeping with him. You were planning on leaving me." Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't buying it. I wasn't falling for her act anymore. "Do you really think I'm that stupid?" I seethed, taking a step closer to her, my voice dropping low. "Do you really think you can just throw me away like this, without consequences?" Her lips trembled as she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean for this to happen." "Oh, you didn't mean for it to happen?" I mocked her. "That's rich. I gave you everything, everything. And you repay me by betraying me with this boy?" Her eyes went wide, and she recoiled. The guilt was written all over her face, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to undo the damage she had caused, the damage she had done to us. "I'm done," I said, my voice final, cutting through the tension like a knife. "You've made your choice, Stephanie. And now, I'm making mine." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "I'm done." The finality of it hit her harder than I had anticipated. For the first time since I had confronted her, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. This wasn't the woman who had toyed with me, who had humiliated me. This was someone who realized the walls were closing in. But it didn't matter. I wasn't interested in her fear anymore. I wasn't interested in anything that had to do with her. Not after everything. Not after the months of deceit, the lies, the blatant disregard for our vows. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she took a step back, her hands trembling at her sides. "Please, let me explain." Explain?" I spat, cutting her off. "What's left to explain? How many times did you sleep with him? How long have you been lying to me? You think I'm just going to let this slide? You think I'm going to walk away from this without a fight?" Her eyes darted nervously. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She didn't have any more excuses. No more justifications. It was too late for that. I leaned in, my voice a low, venomous whisper. "You wanted to leave me for him, didn't you? You thought you could get away with it. You thought you could play with my life and then walk away unscathed. Well, you're wrong." She flinched, the realization of what was about to unfold crashing down on her. Her lips quivered, and she took another step back, her eyes frantically searching for an escape that didn't exist. You don't get to run away from this. You don't get to get off easy, I growled. Not this time. I turned my back to her, pacing the room. I had spent days, weeks, planning this moment. I knew exactly what I needed to do. The affair was only one piece of the puzzle. What mattered now was making sure she understood that I had the power, that I wasn't some weak fool she could walk all over. The truth of it hit me. This wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't just about catching her in the act. It was about showing her that the consequences of her actions were more than just the dissolution of our marriage. This was about stripping her of everything she had built, everything she thought she could keep. It was time to make her regret every single decision she had made. I walked over to the table and picked up my phone. The first message was from Daniel, my friend who had been digging into her past. I had already known it, but seeing the details laid out in front of me was still jarring. The things she had done behind my back, the lies she had told, were far worse than I could have ever imagined. Her little secret world had been thriving for months, her affair partner coming and going as he pleased while I lived in ignorant bliss. But now, the world was about to know. I reached for my laptop and began typing the message I had carefully crafted over the past few days. It was short, direct, and to the point. I attached the screenshots, the evidence, everything I had gathered on her. Every moment of her deception would be laid bare for her friends, family, and her colleagues to see. She wouldn't be able to hide from this. There was no way out. Done, I muttered under my breath as I hit send. Her world was about to fall apart. I could feel it. And yet, as the seconds ticked by, I saw the panic in her eyes increase. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The realization of what I had just done hit her, and for the first time, she looked truly vulnerable. She dropped to her knees, her hands clasped together in front of her, as if begging for mercy. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please don't do this. Don't destroy me. Please, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking." I stood over her, my eyes cold and unyielding. "It's too late for apologies. You should have thought of that before you decided to betray me." I looked down at her, seeing the tears streaming down her face, but it didn't move me. This was her consequence. This was her reckoning. She had shattered my world, and now it was time to make sure she understood the price of her betrayal. "You want me to feel sorry for you?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You want me to fix this for you? After everything you've done?" I watched as she collapsed further, her hands gripping the floor, her sobs louder now, more desperate. "I love you," she whispered, the words sounding hollow. "I always have." I couldn't listen to her lies anymore. She had no more power over me. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew, was gone. In her place was someone who had proven that love meant nothing to her. I turned away, walking to the door. The final decision had been made. It was over. I knew she would never forgive me for what I had done, but that didn't matter. This was my redemption. This was me taking back control. Before I left, I glanced back at her. "Goodbye, Stephanie. You'll never see me again." The sound of the door closing behind me was like the final nail in her coffin. I stood outside, taking a deep breath, feeling a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in months. Her world was in ruins. Her friends, her colleagues, everyone would know what she had done. No amount of apologies would change the fact that she had broken something precious. I had given her everything, and she had thrown it all away for a quick thrill. The truth was, I didn't need her anymore. I had walked away from her once and for all. I had reclaimed my life. I was free. As I stepped into the night, I could feel the weight of the past lift off my shoulders. I had won.